Why was a little girl in a yellow sundress walking alone toward the sound of gunfire? Let's begin. She shouldn't have been there. Not on that base. Not near that sound. But the rhythmic crack of rifle fire had always meant something different. To Emma Rodriguez, to most, it was violence, intimidation. For her, it was the sound of calm warnings and soft lessons. It was Abuelo's voice, whispering, "Breathe in. Let the rifle tell you when it's ready." She walked alone across the hot concrete of Fort Braxton, her small feet padding quietly, sundress fluttering in the dry morning breeze. No one saw her leave the waiting room. No one noticed her slip past the security checkpoint or scale the chain-link fence behind the motor pool. They were too busy, too distracted, or maybe they just weren't used to watching for 8-year-old intruders. The receptionist had been on a personal call. Her father, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, had been whisked away by a Pentagon liaison with a handshake and a warning. No access beyond admin. We're clear on that. He thought he was, but he hadn't counted on his daughter's instincts. Emma didn't know why she was walking toward the noise, only that she had to. Something called to her, like muscle memory woven into her bones, and there it was. The range, 12 men in camo uniforms, all flat on their stomachs, each one aiming downrange at targets that shimmered in the heat like ghosts. She crouched low behind a row of sandbags, watching. Their rifles were long and dark, sleek, not like the Woodstock 22 her grandfather had trained her with, but the shape, the tension, the breath, all of it was familiar. She knew what they were trying to do. She also knew most of them were failing. One shooter in particular stood out, the man closest to her. Thick arms, square jaw, Martinez, stitched across his chest, was forcing it. His cheek weld was sloppy, breathing uneven, shoulders too tight. She watched, almost wincing, as another shot missed wide left. She didn't mean to speak, but her voice rose without warning, sweet, clear, unshaken. "Excuse me, sir? I think you're holding it wrong." The world stopped moving. The men froze mid-breath. The scent of gunpowder hung in the air, and from behind her came the sound of heavy boots. Slow, deliberate, a shadow fell across her. He was the size of a small building, combat boots, gray buzz cut, jaw like carved granite. His uniform was immaculate, but the face was tired, used to heat, stress, command, used to being obeyed. Colonel Mike Harrison. Who in the Sam hell? She turned to face him, arms straight at her sides, her chin lifted in that subtle, unteachable way some children carry. Not defiant, not proud, just certain. "I'd like to try shooting, sir. I think I could help. That man over there, ... He's doing it all wrong." Dead silence. One of the SEALs, maybe 20 years older than her, coughed to cover a laugh. The colonel's face turned red, then purple then. He started laughing loud, unrestrained. Birds scattered from the nearby scrub. "You hear this, boys?" He bellowed. "Annie Oakley in pigtails wants to fix our shooting." There were chuckles now, real ones, nervous ones, but Emma didn't flinch. Her dark eyes stayed on the colonel. Not angry, not smug, just steady. "Sir, with respect," she said, "your men are gripping the stock too tightly. That creates tension in their upper bodies, and if they're holding their breath too long, the shot won't break clean. Abuelo taught me." "Abuelo?" The colonel cut in, smile faltering. "Carlos Rodriguez," she said. "He was my grandfather." The laughter died like a switch had been thrown. Even the air changed, subtle but real. Every man on that line had heard the name Carlos Ghost. Rodriguez, the Marine sniper with 127 confirmed kills. The ghost in the jungle. The myth they studied in training. "Your Ghost's granddaughter?" Emma nodded, a touch of pride sneaking into her voice. "He taught me everything. Started when I was 5. Martinez, the shooter she critiqued, slowly stood up. "That true, Colonel?" He asked softly. "That she's his kin?" Doctor. Miguel Rodriguez came running at that moment, breathless, pale, panic in his eyes. He spotted her next to the colonel and froze. I'm so sorry. He stammered in front of a dozen guns and 20 unblinking stares. She wasn't supposed to. She must have. Your daughter claims to be Carlos Rodriguez's granddaughter. The colonel said, arms folded tight. Miguel sighed, shoulders sagging. She is my father-in-law. He trained her every weekend. Side talent couldn't. Wait. Emma looked up at her father. Just once? Can I show them? The colonel narrowed his eyes. His whole world was upside down, but curiosity gnawed at him. You hit the 100-yard target? He said. Just once. Dead center. I'll buy you the biggest ice cream on base. But you miss. We're done. And you go back to Daddy. Emma looked at him with ancient eyes. What happens when I don't miss, Colonel? That's when the SEALs started whispering. Martinez returned a moment later with a youth-sized Ruger. .22 precision rifle, light, reliable, a trainer's tool, but nothing that screamed miracle maker. Emma took it reverently, checking the scope, adjusting. The trigger pull. Her small fingers moved with eerie confidence, like she'd held it 1,000 times. She knows what she's doing, Martinez murmured. Colonel Harrison said nothing. He just watched. She lay flat on the mat, legs at a perfect angle, elbows down. Rifle supported on a sandbag. She was a portrait in symmetry. Range hot, someone called. 1 round loaded, 1 breath held. 1 trigger pulled. The shot cracked. Martinez raised binoculars, paused, lowered them. Raised them again, then turned to the colonel with disbelief in his eyes. Dead center bullseye. Silence. Then Emma sat up and looked at the colonel. That was a warm-up shot, she said. Would you like to see what Abuelo really taught me? No one laughed this time. The air around the range had changed. Like the gravity was heavier. Like the truth of what they were seeing couldn't quite be believed. Colonel Harrison crossed his arms, covering the tremor in his fingers. 10 shots. He said, same target, bullseye, all 10. Emma nodded, loading her next round. She didn't pause, didn't second guess. Shot after shot rolled off like water flowing downhill. Natural, unforced, like her body had memorized a rhythm the world hadn't caught up to. 3rd shot. Martinez called. Same hole. 5th shot, clean group. 7th. Jesus, she's stitching a cloverleaf. The range was packed now. Soldiers from nearby units. Cooks, clerks, even officers. Phones recording, eyes wide. 10th shot, silence. 10 shots, single ragged hole, Martinez whispered. Half-inch. Grouping. The colonel said nothing. His pride felt bruised, but not from shame. From awe, Emma stood up, brushing sand from her knees. Then she walked to Petty Officer Johnson's position and adjusted his grip like it was the most natural thing in the world. The rifle wants to shoot straight, she said gently. You're fighting it. She moved down the line. 1 by 1, adjusting elbows, fixing cheek welds, reteaching professionals with the kind of soft authority no one dared question. The colonel turned to Dr. Rodriguez, dazed. This is impossible, he murmured. Kids don't shoot like this. Miguel nodded slowly. She doesn't shoot like a kid. She shoots like Carlos. 100 eyes were now on Emma as she returned to the colonel. Could we try something harder? She asked. Abuelo always said 100 yards was for warm-ups. What? Distance? The colonel asked, unsure why he was even asking. 300 yards, she said with a soft smile. That's where real shooting begins. And just like that, the legend of Emma Rodriguez had begun. She walked beside the colonel as if she belonged there, as if the 100 pairs of eyes tracking her steps were no more remarkable than dandelions swaying in the breeze. 300 yards sounded obscene. For seasoned snipers, that distance was respectable. For a child with a borrowed rifle, it should have been impossible. But Emma never looked intimidated. Not once, Colonel Harrison felt sweat pooling under his collar. Though the air was still cool, he had seen a lot in his 30 years of service. Men broken by fear, soldiers rising beyond every expectation. But he had never seen a little girl stroll toward the far line, humming a Spanish lullaby. The crowd was growing. Mechanics left their tool benches. Medics drifted in from the clinic. Even the chow hall staff found excuses to slip outside. Word had spread fast. The ghost granddaughter is going for the record. Someone whispered the base's best grouping at this distance. 5 shots in a 23-inch circle. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Vance, a Marine Corps legend in her own right. No one had come close in years. Emma stopped beside the 300-yard bench. Laying her bag on the concrete, she looked up at Colonel Harrison with those wide old eyes. "What's the record again?" she asked in that calm, almost tender voice. 23 inches, he said, voice hoarse. She nodded, like she was being told which aisle the cereal was on. Miguel finally caught up, his face pale. "Emma," he whispered, "this has gone far enough. These men, these people, this isn't play." She turned, her gaze softening. "I know, Papa." But Abuelo said that when someone says you can't, you must show them why you can. He had no answer for that. She lay prone, adjusting the mat, the sandbag, the scope. The ritual was slower this time, more deliberate. She studied the wind flags strung every 100 yards, felt the invisible currents brushing her cheek. The murmurs behind them were uneasy. This wasn't a demonstration anymore. This was a challenge to everything they believed about skill and experience. Colonel Harrison tried to remind himself she was 8, but the voice inside him kept saying she was something else entirely. The living echo of a legend whose name still haunted sniper school textbooks. "The wind is shifting," she murmured, almost to herself. About 12 miles an hour at the first flag, dropping to 8 at the second, picking up again at the third. Several instructors traded startled looks. They had spent years learning to read wind precisely. She did it like it was a second language. Emma worked the bolt, loaded a single round. The metallic click sounded louder than the murmuring crowd. Her breathing slowed. In, out, in, hold. The first shot cracked across the range. Martinez peered through the spotting scope, adjusting the focus with shaking hands. 1 inch high, center line. She nodded, as though confirming an equation. Her small hands made the slightest adjustment to the scope. She licked her finger, held it to the breeze again. "Ready," she whispered. "The second shot," Martinez said, voice almost reverent. Someone in the crowd let out a shaky sigh. Third shot, fourth, fifth. Each fired only after she waited, studied the wind, and felt that precise moment of stillness when Martinez finally lifted his head. His eyes were wide and wet. "Group measures 1.7 inches, he said softly. "New base record." Silence. Then the applause broke like a dam. Cheers, shouts, even some of the officers clapping slowly. Wonder in their eyes. Emma didn't react. She just began clearing her chamber, securing the bolt, inspecting the barrel. It was the same care she'd shown in her grandfather's garage after every practice session, because the ritual was never about showing off. Colonel Harrison stepped forward. He felt unsteady, the ground beneath him tilting. "That was remarkable," he said. He couldn't make his voice do anything but rasp. "Thank you, sir," Emma replied. "Is there more?" Her eyes lifted, unblinking. "Yes, 500 yards," he swallowed. The 500-yard line was reserved for the most elite. Only a handful had ever qualified there. Fewer still had broken records, and yet she said it without arrogance, without fear. Just a question. "Will you let me?" Behind him, the SEALs shifted their weight, waiting for his decision. He almost said no. He almost called the whole thing off. But something in him, maybe the same something that had made him a soldier, refused to deny her. 500 yards, he heard himself say. We'll reset the line. As she rose, she reached into her bag, pulled out a tiny cloth pouch, and pressed it into his hand. My abuelo gave me this, she said. He said it was for when people needed reminding. He opened it. Inside was a single brass casing, faded, scarred. The initial CR etched by hand near the rim. Colonel Harrison closed his fist around it, feeling a tightness in his chest he hadn't known in years. When she walked ahead to the new firing line, no one followed her at first. She moved alone. The desert heat shimmered around her like a vial. And all he could think was that maybe the legends they told in sniper school weren't over yet. The wind picked up as she reached the bench. It howled over the dunes, tugged her hair loose from its neat ponytail, but she never looked back to see if they were watching. She knew they were. She set her rifle down and studied the horizon. Her lips moved in a silent conversation with someone only she could hear. Abuelo, help me remember. The crowd gathered slowly. Hundreds now, soldiers in uniform, civilians in jeans. Even officers who would never normally stoop to watch a child's demonstration. Colonel Harrison stood among them, that brass casing still. Warm in his hand, he heard a voice behind him, low and rough. My God, Sergeant Major Thompson murmured. She's really going to try it. He didn't answer, because in his heart, he already knew she wasn't trying. She was showing them what was possible, and she wasn't done yet. The 500-yard line had always felt distant. Even for experienced snipers, it was where theory began to fray and instinct took over. At that distance, every variable mattered. Barometric pressure, mirage distortion, the angle of the sun. Most shooters felt the pressure before they even picked up their rifle. Emma Rodriguez didn't seem to feel anything but wind. She kneeled beside her mat, unpacking her rifle like it was a sacred ritual. Not rushed, not theatrical, just precise. Her fingers moved like her grandfather's had. Steady, reverent, every movement had a purpose. Nothing wasted. The crowd was quiet now. Not from doubt, not anymore, but from something deeper, a kind of collective reverence. Sergeant Major Thompson whispered from behind a spotting scope. You can barely even see the target from here. It's shimmering in the mirage. Colonel Harrison nodded without a word. He was watching her more than the target now. The little girl in the yellow sundress had become something else entirely. Not a novelty, not a spectacle, but a mystery the whole base was trying to solve. And yet, she looked like a child again as she sat, legs crossed, watching the wind flags dance across the desert. But her expression was different now, serious in a way most adults never reached. Focused like a surgeon preparing for a delicate cut. She studied the field, not just the target. The land, the light, the movement of the heat rising off the sand, the wind shifting twice. She murmured, southwest here, then more west at 300, then back again near the berm. The SEALs exchanged glances. That level of environmental reading? It was advanced. Some of them were still learning how to interpret mirage bends and shimmer angles. Emma just saw it. Captain Williams, a sniper instructor from a nearby base, leaned toward Harrison. I've taught for 15 years, he whispered. I've never seen anyone read the range like this, and I've never seen someone her age even attempt it. Colonel Harrison didn't reply. He was watching her adjust the elevation on her scope. One click, then two more. Pause. Windage dial, a tiny correction, then another smaller one. It wasn't luck, it was a conversation. Her and the rifle, her and the wind, her and someone else. Abuelo used to say, she whispered, voice almost carried away by the breeze. That at 500 yards, you're not shooting a bullet. You're conducting an orchestra of physics. The rifle wasn't just a tool. It was part of her. She loaded the first round. The crowd instinctively leaned forward. Time stretched. The only sound was the wind and the fluttering flags. She exhaled slowly, fired. The sound cracked through the stillness, echoing into the open air, Martinez tracked the bullet through the scope. His knuckles white. Hit 1 inch left. High by. Maybe 2. Emma didn't even nod. She simply adjusted. 1 breath. 1 tiny turn of the knob. The second shot cracked. Martinez's voice was tighter this time. Dead center bullseye. A wave of quiet awe swept through the crowd. No cheers this time. Just disbelief. Shot 3. Shot 4. Each fired only after she watched the wind flags bend just so. After the shimmer paused, after the world aligned, and then came the 5th. She waited longer for this one. Nearly a full minute. The wind was gusting now, unpredictable. The silence stretched, and then ... She fired. Martinez blinked behind the scope. Adjusted. Swallowed hard. I need someone else to confirm this, he said. I don't trust my own eyes. Captain Williams took the scope, stared, then took a long breath. 5 shots, he said. Loud enough for everyone to hear. 28-inch group. Colonel Harrison closed his eyes. She'd done it. Broken the 500-yard record. Broken the legend, and not by chance, not by accident, by design. The reaction was delayed, like everyone had to process the moment first. And then the applause came. It was thunderous, deafening. But Emma just stood. She walked over to Colonel Harrison and looked up at him with those same calm eyes. I think I owe you an apology, she said softly. He blinked. An apology? For being disrespectful earlier, she said. Abuelo taught me that skill without humility is just showing off. And showing off dishonors the gift. The colonel's throat tightened. She had just broken 3 base records. Had taught Navy SEALs how to shoot more efficiently. Had outperformed trained snipers under real-time wind correction. And she was apologizing. No, Emma, he said, dropping to one knee so he could look her in the eye. I'm the one who needs to say sorry. The crowd fell silent again. I judge you by your age. I assumed. I doubted. That's not what good leaders do. And it's not what your abuelo would have done either. He stood up, raising his voice just enough for the crowd to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to remember this moment. The air stilled. Today, I was taught humility by an 8-year-old. And it's the most important lesson I've learned in my entire career. He turned back to her. Emma Rodriguez, it would be my honor if you considered teaching some of your grandfather's techniques to my soldiers. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time all day. I'd love that, she whispered. Abuelo always said that knowledge should be shared. It multiplies that way. Behind them, the sun dipped lower. But the warmth on the range had nothing to do with sunlight. It was something deeper, something lasting. And the day wasn't over yet. Why did she stop just before getting in the car and walk back toward the soldier who wasn't clapping? The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in soft golds and copper reds. Shadows stretched long across the firing range. Most days, this would be the quiet hour. Rifles cleaned, gear stored, soldiers off to chow or bed. But today was different. Emma Rodriguez was still on the range, and no one wanted to leave. Colonel Harrison stood quietly, arms folded, watching something that should have felt absurd. A group of elite Navy SEALs sitting cross-legged on the sand, watching an 8-year-old girl in a yellow sundress demonstrate how to breathe. Not through your chest, she said gently, her hands moving in a wave across her own ribs. But from here deep, let it settle, like water in a still pond. 12. Hardened warriors, men who had jumped out of aircraft, stormed compounds, and faced death in distant lands, nodded solemnly. It didn't feel strange. It felt necessary. Staff Sergeant Martinez exhaled slowly, mimicking her rhythm. 15 years, he said to no one in particular. And I'm only now learning how to actually shoot. Emma looked up, face softening with memory. Abuelo used to say that your breath is the rhythm of your heart, and your heart is the rhythm of your shot. When they match, you disappear. Colonel Harrison turned as Dr. Miguel Rodriguez approached, glancing down at his watch. "We've got to return the rental car," he said softly, "and the airport's almost an hour away." Emma looked over, torn. But before she could speak, Harrison stepped forward with something small and polished in his hand. A box. Wooden, the grain dark and smooth. "Before you leave," he said, voice low, "we have something for you." He opened the box. Inside was a challenge coin. Not the standard brass. This one gleamed silver under the falling sun. It bore the insignia of Fort Braxton and, engraved in quiet elegance, 2 words, "Honorary." "Member, this coin has only been given 3 times," Harrison said, voice gravel thick with memory. Once to a Medal of Honor recipient who pulled his unit out under fire in Vietnam. Once to a dog, a Belgian Malinois who found 17 IEDs in Afghanistan and saved God knows how many lives. He paused, then handed it to her with both hands. "And now, to you," Emma took it gently. "Thank you, Colonel. I'll keep it safe." "There's more," he added. "We've spoken with the base commander. Anytime you want to return to Fort Braxton, our doors are open. The range is yours, and we'd be honored to learn everything your grandfather taught you." Applause rose again, not wild this time, but respectful, sincere. Soldiers clapped not for spectacle, but for legacy, for what had been passed from one generation to the next, not through rank or medals, but through wisdom, through care. Emma looked like she was about to say goodbye, but then her eyes caught something. A man standing at the edge of the group, half in shadow, arms folded. Petty Officer Johnson, youngest of the team. He wasn't clapping. His face was heavy, shoulders slumped. Emma stepped away from her father, walked slowly toward him. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. He hesitated, looking down at her shoes. "It's nothing, really." She just waited. Finally he sighed. "I've been struggling with my shooting scores. Can't pass requalification. I'm supposed to. Retest next week. If I fail again, I'm off the team." Emma tilted her head. "Would you like help?" His eyes widened. You'd help me." She smiled. "We have a little time before our flight." For the next hour, Emma worked with Johnson one-on-one. Like she had all day. She didn't rush. She didn't command. She asked, observed, corrected. "Your trigger pull is too deep," she murmured, adjusting his grip. "You're pulling instead of pressing. You're breathing too high." She said a few minutes later, "Let it come from lower. From here, feel it behind your ribs." "You're trying too hard," she added, lost. Abuelo said, forcing. "A shot is like chasing butterflies with a hammer." The SEALs laughed at that. Softly, Johnson smiled for the first time all day. Then he fired. His grouping tightened, shot after shot. "Closer, closer." "Center ring," Martinez said, peering through the scope. He's never shot this type before. Johnson stared at the target, speechless. "How did you know?" He whispered. Emma shrugged. "Everyone has a signature, a pattern in their mistakes. Abuelo taught me how to read them." By now, the sun had dipped below the mountains. The light was fading. Emma's father checked his watch again, this time more urgently. "Emma," he called, "we really have to go." More soldiers had gathered by then. Mechanics, instructors, a few off-duty officers. One by one, they had begun asking her questions, quiet, respectful, about sight picture, about natural point of aim, about letting the rifle settle into you, not the other way around. Emma answered each question like a teacher in her own classroom. Not once did she speak down to them. She spoke across, and they listened. Finally, Sergeant Major Thompson stepped forward, his voice low. "Sir," he said to Colonel Harrison, "I've been thinking." "About?" "This isn't just about her or about today. This is about how we teach, how we train, what we miss when we only focus on mechanics." He looked at Emma, then back to the colonel. "I'd like to document her methods, everything, her grandfather's." breathing techniques, her environmental readings, her approach to focus and rhythm. Harrison nodded slow. Do it and stay in contact with Dr. Rodriguez, if Emma's willing. We'll build a new curriculum around what she's taught us. As the final light drained from the sky, Emma packed away her rifle for the last time. The SEALs helped her. No one spoke. No one wanted to break the moment. The quiet said everything. They walked her to the car as a group. One by one, they shook her hand, and not a single one held back. The looks in their eyes weren't condescending. They weren't humoring a child. They were saluting a peer, a teacher, as her father started. The engine. Emma turned in her seat and looked back through the window. The group stood there still, watching, waving, and at the center, Colonel Harrison, his arm raised in a crisp salute. Emma didn't salute back. She simply smiled, and that was enough. Why was the base commander already waiting at the gate when they pulled up? The car ride started in silence, not the awkward kind, the reverent kind. The kind that settles over you when you know you've just witnessed something you'll spend the rest of your life trying to explain. Emma sat in the passenger seat, legs tucked beneath her, face pressed against the glass as the desert blurred by. Her father gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles white. He hadn't spoken since leaving the base, not because he was angry, not because he was tired, because he was overwhelmed. After a while, he finally exhaled. "You changed something today," he said softly. Not taking his eyes off the road, Emma didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes distant, as if still seeing the wind flags fluttering downrange at the security gate. They were met with something unexpected. The base commander himself, Brigadier General Patterson, standing with a small contingent of officers, all waiting in formation. As the car rolled to a stop, Emma sat up straighter. Miguel lowered the window. "Dr. Rodriguez," the general said, then lowered his gaze to Emma. "Miss Rodriguez, before you go, may I have one more moment of your time?" Miguel looked stunned, but Emma simply nodded, calm, poised, still wrapped in the stillness of the range. They were escorted to a small administrative building near the airfield. Inside, the general guided them to a private room. No formality, no ceremony, just quiet. Then, from a locked cabinet, he pulled a manila folder and slid it across the table. "These," he said, "are the archived handwritten notes of Master Sergeant Carlos Ghost Rodriguez. After his retirement, he donated some of his personal journals to the Corps for research purposes. We never published them. Most assumed the techniques were too abstract, too philosophical, not military enough." Emma's fingers hesitated just above the folder, like she was afraid to touch it. Then slowly she opened it. There it was, her grandfather's handwriting, sharp, angular, each line etched with care, diagrams, breath cycles, observations about mirage, wind currents, heartbeat tempo, and emotional control. She traced a line with her finger. Her lips moved silently, reading a phrase she already knew by heart. "You don't control the rifle. You become quiet enough that it forgets you're holding it." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. "This is his," she whispered. "All of it?" The general nodded. "It belongs with the one who understands it." She closed the folder and held it against her chest, like a relic, like a gift passed down from a ghost who never really left her side. And still, she said nothing more. They were escorted to the airfield where a small military shuttle was already waiting. Not commercial, not civilian. The general had made arrangements. Quiet ones, no media, no cameras, just a gesture of respect. As Emma and her father climbed aboard, a few of the SEALs gathered near the tarmac. Colonel Harrison was among them, but this time he didn't approach. He stood with hands behind his back, watching, nodding once as their eyes met through the window. He didn't salute. She didn't wave. It was enough. The jet engines roared softly, and within minutes, the desert shrank behind them. The sky opened wide. Emma sat quietly, folder still in her lap, thumb rubbing a corner like a worry stone. Her father watched her for a long time. Finally, he said what he'd been thinking since the moment she laid down on that first shooting mat. "You really are him," he whispered. She looked up. "Who?" "Your grandfather," she tilted her head. "No, Papa, I'm not him. I'm just the part of him that's still listening." The words hung in the cabin, heavy, beautiful. Neither of them spoke again for the rest of the flight. When they landed, there was no ceremony, no banners, just the quiet lights of a small civilian airport and the sound of distant traffic humming like a lullaby. But Emma knew something had changed. Not in the world, not yet in her at home. She placed the folder on her desk and didn't open it again that night. She didn't need to. She already carried every word inside her. What mattered now wasn't what she'd done. It was what came next. She understood something most shooters never did. That the rifle wasn't the point. It was the mirror. And the wind? The silence? The impossible shots? They weren't about hitting targets. They were about who you became when you let go of noise, ego, and fear, and learned to breathe with the earth. To stop fighting the rifle ... and simply get out of its way. Why was her name trending before she even got home? The sun hadn't risen yet when Miguel Rodriguez's phone started buzzing. Emma was still asleep, curled up on the living room couch with the old folder clutched loosely to her chest. She hadn't changed out of her travel clothes. She hadn't spoken much on the drive home. Just one phrase, barely whispered as they pulled into their driveway. He would have liked the flags. Papa, the way they danced. Now the phone buzzed again, then again, and again. Missed calls, texts, notifications piling on top of each other like falling dominoes. Miguel frowned, swiped one open, and felt his stomach drop. Hashtag Little Sniper Girl. Hashtag Emma Rodriguez. #Shield record broken. She hit 10 bullseyes, then asked for 500 yards. The first video had been posted just hours after they'd left the base. A short clip taken by a staff sergeant, showing Emma adjusting her scope, whispering about the wind, then firing. The grouping she made at 100 yards was clear. Even on a phone screen, half an inch, one ragged hole, the caption read, "She's 8. She's real. And she just made every SEAL on this base rethink everything." Miguel rubbed his eyes. More clips followed, some taken from shaky phones, others from base surveillance cameras someone had quietly leaked. The most viral showed her standing beside Colonel Harrison as he whispered, "I judged you by your age. That's not what good leaders do." Another had captured her turning to a struggling petty officer and saying, "If you're fighting the rifle, you're already behind." Millions of views, tens of thousands of shares, comments ranging from shocked to inspired to flat-out disbelieving. And then came the interviews. Requests flooded Miguel's inbox. News outlets, military blogs, morning talk shows, influencers looking to catch a piece of the fire. Some called her the child sniper. Others, Ghost's shadow. A few just said what everyone else was thinking. This isn't possible. And yet, there it is. Miguel stood in the kitchen, scrolling, stunned, overwhelmed, and just a little afraid. Because for the first time, the quiet legacy of Carlos Ghost Rodriguez was no longer something private. It was public, explosive, wild, and Emma? She didn't even know yet. She stirred around 6A, rubbing her eyes as the early light spilled across the rug. She sat up slowly, blinked at her father. He said nothing, just handed her the phone. She read in silence for several minutes. Then, finally, "They're calling me things I'm not," Miguel nodded. "I know." Emma looked up at him. "I didn't go there to be famous. I know, Mia. I just wanted to help." Miguel sat beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes the world grabs onto what it doesn't understand. But you don't have to carry what they call you. You just have to carry what you know." She thought about that, then opened the folder again. The pages felt heavier now. Not because of the paper, but because of what they meant and what they'd become. I don't want this to become a trick show, she said softly. Abuelo never taught me to perform. He taught me to listen. Miguel smiled, a little sad. And that's why they need you, because you're not trying to be something. You're being something. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Sergeant Major Thompson. Sir, hope I'm not intruding. Just wanted to let you know. We've started transcribing Emma's methods. Range instructors are running morning sessions based on her breathing sequence. We're calling it Ghost Protocol. Thought she might like that. Emma read the message, then handed the phone back. With a small, tired smile, she'd love that, Miguel corrected gently. Emma blinked. She? Your grandfather. You always say he would be proud. But I think we're past pretending you're walking in his footsteps, Emma. She looked down. You're not following him anymore, Miguel said. You're standing beside him, and maybe you're starting to lead. They sat together in silence as the sun warmed the living room. And then the doorbell rang. Outside stood a man in dress uniform, Air Force. Next to him, a woman in a Marine Corps blazer. Behind him, a quiet man with a Department of Defense badge. Miguel opened the door, wary. The woman stepped forward, professional but soft. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm Major Klein. This is Colonel Tate. May we come in? Miguel nodded slowly. Emma stood at the hallway's edge, watching. The visitors didn't smile. They didn't joke. Their tone wasn't celebratory. It was respectful, careful. Major Klein spoke first. Emma, we're not here to recruit you. We're not here to exploit you. But there's something happening right now that we can't ignore. She held up a flash drive. These are marksmanship evaluation scores. SEAL teams. Marine Recon Delta shooters. We compared their metrics with yours at Fort Braxton. Not just grouping. Not just wind call. But neurological response times, emotional regulation, stress fluctuation. Colonel Tate stepped forward. Emma, he said plainly, we believe you're accessing a performance state we haven't seen before, something we call dynamic intuitive processing. You're not just aiming, you're syncing with the weapon, with the environment, with the moment. Emma tilted her head. I'm just doing what Abuelo taught me. They exchanged a glance. That's what we're trying to understand, Tate said. Because if what your grandfather passed down can be shared, if it can be taught, it could change how we train marksmen. Not to shoot faster, but to shoot less, to shoot cleaner, to shoot with intention. They didn't ask her for anything then. No contracts, no promises. They simply asked, would you help us study it? Emma thought for a long time, then nodded. I'll share what Abuelo gave me, she said. But not for trophies, not for war games, only for discipline. And for those who respect it, Major Klein smiled. The first smile of the visit. That's more than fair. As they left, Emma returned to her folder, flipping open a page near the back. One line caught her eye. Precision isn't about control. It's about respect. The world was calling her names, building a story around her. But she knew the truth. She wasn't a prodigy. She was a promise kept. Why did the invitation come sealed with a gold insignia and addressed not to Emma, but to Instructor Rodriguez? It arrived 3 days later, a heavy envelope, cream-colored, no return address. Just the Department of Defense insignia embossed in gold. Miguel found it first, sitting alone in the mailbox like a dare. He brought it inside, placed it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for several long seconds before calling out, Emma? You got mail. She patted him barefoot, hair still wet from her shower, and tilted her head when she saw it. She picked it up gently, flipped it over. The address line didn't say Miss Emma Rodriguez. It said, Instructor Rodriguez, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, Santa Fe. And then she tore the seal with careful fingers, as if opening a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. Inside was a single page, crisp, formal. To Instructor Rodriguez from United States Marine Corps. Department of Marksmanship Advancement, Miss Rodriguez. Following unanimous recommendation from Base Command at Fort Braxton, and upon review of archived sniper training methodology left by Master Sergeant Carlos "Ghost" Rodriguez, we would like to extend a formal invitation for you to co-lead a closed instructor seminar at Marine Corps Base Quantico. This is not a recruitment. It is a request for instruction. We believe your application of legacy breathing, environmental reading, and rhythm-based sight calibration represents a critical advancement in training pedagogy. Session will be attended by senior instructors from the Marine Sniper School, Army Marksmanship Unit, Navy SEAL Qualification Course, and invited NATO allies. You will have full discretion over how you present your techniques. Should you accept, travel arrangements and clearance will be coordinated with your guardian. We are not asking for tricks. We are asking to learn. Semper Fidelis. Call Dana Whitaker, Commanding Officer. MCB Quantico. Emma read the letter twice. Then she folded it neatly. Then she said something her father hadn't expected. I want to go. Miguel studied her face. Are you sure? This won't be like the range at Fort Braxton. These will be seasoned instructors. Senior officers. She nodded. I know. He waited then. And you're not afraid? She smiled gently. No, Abuelo already taught me everything I need. That night, she sat at her desk with her grandfather's folder open beside her. She didn't read it like a student cramming for a test. She read it like a granddaughter remembering. She copied passages into a new notebook, one designed not just for her, but for others. She titled the front page, Stillness Before Fire. The Rodriguez Method. Her first line was something she'd never told anyone before. I don't teach people how to shoot. I teach them how to stop fighting the moment. The days passed quickly. Word of her upcoming instructions spread quietly through military channels. Quantico prepared a private range facility. High-ranking instructors submitted questions in advance. Not theories. Fears. How do we read shooters who overthink? How do we correct without breaking confidence? How do we teach silence, not just sound? Emma wrote out her answers by hand. Sometimes she quoted her grandfather. Sometimes she simply wrote what she felt. The night before they flew to Quantico, her father found her awake, sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, eyes closed. You all right, Mia? She opened her eyes slowly, just remembering how the wind moved that day at the range. He knelt beside her. You nervous? She thought about it. No, she said, but I don't want to prove anything. I just want to give something. Miguel swallowed hard. That's what he'd want too. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out the boar snake her grandfather had given her, the one she'd used to clean her rifle at Fort Braxton after the 10-shot challenge. It was worn now, faded, but it still smelled faintly of oil and cedar wood. She held it for a long moment, then whispered, Time to teach. They landed at Marine Corps Base Quantico to a sky streaked with pale orange and white, the kind of clean light that made even hardened shooters pause and breathe slower. Emma didn't arrive through the main gates. She was taken through the instructor entrance, where her ID badge read, Rodriguez, E. Instructor, Civilian Specialist Clearance, Level 2, Observational and Demonstration Authority. Miguel walked silently beside her. Everything was quiet until they reached the range, where 5 of the most decorated shooting instructors in the armed forces stood in a row. Watching her, one of them, a tall, weathered man in desert fatigues, stepped forward. Emma Rodriguez, he said, extending his hand. She shook it firm. Steady. We've read your work, he said, and we've reviewed the footage. But I have one question before we begin. She tilted her head. He nodded toward the empty range. If this isn't about bullseyes, then what is it about? Emma walked forward, set down her bag, laid out her scope, her notebook, her folder, then turned back toward them and said softly, It's about stillness, about letting go of noise and teaching your body to trust what your ego forgot. The instructor said nothing. But one of them, a gruff woman from SEAL Team 8, smiled quietly, and whispered to no one in particular. She's not teaching marksmanship. She's teaching presence. What do you teach a room full of warriors when you're 8 years old and already know how not to miss? The classroom wasn't a classroom. It was a firing range with no targets. Instead, on that cold morning at Quantico, 6 military instructors sat shoulder to shoulder, cross-legged on rubber mats, notebooks open, weapons holstered, and Emma stood in front of them with no rifle in her hands. No weapon at all. Just a notebook and a voice that didn't shake. Most people think marksmanship starts when you pick up a rifle, she said, but it doesn't. She knelt on the concrete, touching it with her fingers. It starts here, on the ground, where your breath slows and the world gets quiet. They listened not because they had to, but because something about the way she paused between words made everything else around them feel louder, clumsier, less real. Emma flipped open the notebook. Her first diagram wasn't of a rifle. It was of lungs. Abuelo used to say the body has 3 triggers: breath, intention, and timing. The rifle's just the last to move. One instructor raised a hand. Almost awkwardly. What do you do when the wind shifts mid-breath? Emma smiled. You thank it, she said. The instructor blinked. Because it reminded you that you're not in control. And the sooner you stop pretending you are, the better your shot will be. Someone scribbled that down. Another whispered. She's teaching philosophy. But that wasn't quite true. She was teaching clarity, without decoration, without ego. After 20 minutes of theory, they moved to live fire. Each instructor was paired with Emma, one at a time, no showboating. No records to break, just diagnostics. Breathing corrections, position realignment. She didn't command, she adjusted. Sometimes with a word, sometimes just with a glance. And it worked. Shot after shot tightened. Even seasoned instructors began feeling things they hadn't felt in years. The rifle settling with them instead of beneath them. The wind as rhythm, not resistance. You don't shoot at the target, Emma whispered to one of them. You return the bullet to where it wants to go. By noon, no one questioned why. She was there. By 3:00 p.m., they had stopped calling her Miss Rodriguez or instructor. They called her Emma. By 5:00, they didn't want her to leave, but she did, because she wasn't meant to stay. That night, at the hotel, Emma sat by the window overlooking the Virginia treetops, watching as dusk crept across the sky. Her father entered quietly, holding his phone. You've been requested for something, he said. She turned. He handed her the phone. It was a simple message from Colonel Harrison back at Fort Braxton. The team would like to hold a ceremony in honor of Carlos Rodriguez. We've placed a stone at the firing range, just above the 300-yard line. We thought it might mean something. If you fired the first shot to honor it. No audience, no press. Just us. No records this time. Just remembrance. Emma read it, then nodded and whispered, yes. The sun had barely crested the mountains when she lay prone once more at Fort Braxton. This time, there were no crowds, no phones, just wind and silence. 12 SEALs stood behind her in a silent semicircle. At the 300-yard mark stood a new stone marker, no bigger than a helmet. Simple inscription. Carlos Ghost Rodriguez, 127, confirmed, one eternal. Still watching the wind. Emma didn't adjust her scope, didn't zero anything. She didn't need to. She breathed, let her heart slow, and gently pressed the trigger. The shot rang out across the range like a bell and hit dead center, not because she wanted to impress, not because she needed to perform, but because she knew that sometimes the most powerful shots are the ones that echo without echo. That day, Emma stayed behind after the team had gone, her small frame seated beside the stone. She unpacked her grandfather's folder and gently laid it against the base of the marker. She didn't say goodbye. She just said, time to teach. Later, Colonel Harrison would include the moment in his personal journal. It would never be published, never shared. He wrote, "She didn't come to prove she could shoot. She came to remind us why we ever picked up a rifle in the first place. Not for glory, not for fear, but to learn how still we could become before." The world made us flinch. Emma Rodriguez returned home that night with no medals, no ribbons, just a name whispered across military circles like wind through tall grass. A name spoken by instructors who now taught patience. A name etched into range logs and sniper school protocols under a new section: Rodriguez method, breathing, rhythm, presence. She didn't seek credit, didn't want fame. But those who had seen her understood something vital. She hadn't just broken records. She had broken the rules of what was possible. And in doing so, she left behind something far greater than trophies. She left behind a stillness, a standard, a way forward. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and then walks away in a yellow sundress, with a rifle slung over one shoulder and the wind at her back.